عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي رب زدني علما اللهم فقهنا في الدين aameen ya rabbal alameen. Assalamualaikum and thank you for joining us today for Rahma's English course. Inshallah, I hope that all of you had a wonderful week. So today, inshallah, we are going to continue where we left off from ayah number 51 of Surah Maida. And inshallah, today's lesson is going to be ayah number 51 and ayah number 52. So we will just start first with the recitation of these verses, and then we will move on to the analysis and our theory portion for this class. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض ومن يتولهم منكم فإنه منهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين فترى الذين في قلوبهم مرض يسارعون فيهم يقولون نخشى أن تصيبنا دائرة فعسى الله أن يأتي بالفتح أو أمر من عنده فيصبحوا على ما أسروا في أنفسهم نادمين. So that is our lesson, ayah number 51 and ayah number 52. So for the theory part of our class, as we mentioned in the previous lesson, we are going to start the next topic of med. So for the previous classes, we were covering med asli or med tabi'i. This is the natural med, and this is going to be the natural two-count med. And for med tabi'i, we learned that there were a couple different types of med tabi'i. First, there was the natural med. This is going to be the two harakat, the fatha followed by alif, the dhamma followed by waw, and the kasra followed by ya. So this was the natural two-count med. Mad sila as-sughra, which is also two counts, and this was found in the pronoun, the masculine third-person pronoun. So this was for a dhamma or kasra, and we had a couple of rules for this. And this was known as the lesser connecting med. So this only occurs on the letter ha, but this is also a two-count med, which is why it is known as med asli or med tabi'i. And then also we covered the last type of med asli, which is med al-iwad. And this is known as the substitution med. It is found whenever we have fathatain, when we have a tanween of fatha, meaning two fathas. And if we decide to stop at the end of this word that ends with two fathas, we will substitute the fathatain for an alif two-count med, such as aliman gets turned into alima. Ahadan turns into ahada. So now this is a two-count med. So this is also med al-asli for that reason. So we learned that med asli or med tabi'i are known as the natural mudud because there are all two counts. So we have med al-iwad, med sila as-sughra, and then med asli itself. All of these are two-count med. They are not lengthened for more than two counts, only two counts. Now, when we learned the next type of meds, we briefly touched upon this in the previous class. These are known as med fari'i. These are all known as med fari'i. So these type of mudud, med fari'i, are all going to be longer than two counts. So these are going to be mudud that are 4 counts, or 5 counts, or even in some cases, 6 counts. So the reason why this is known as med fari'i is because it is aktharu min harakatain. It is more than 2 harakat. So any med that is pulled for longer than 2 counts is going to be known as med fari'i. And when it comes to mad fari'i, these longer types of mads that are longer than 2 counts, you will see that the letter after is always going to be either a hamza or it is going to be a sukoon. There is always a hamza after the mad, or there is a sukoon after a mad. And we experimented with this as we were reciting our previous lessons. We were looking out for these mudud, for that squiggly sign of mad. And we noticed that every time there was that sign of mad, the next letter was always a hamza or it was a sukoon. And the reason for this is that this hamza or this sukoon is causing that mad to be longer than 2 counts. بسبب الhamza or بسبب السكون. Because of the hamza or because of the sukoon, that mad, that 2 count mad is turned into a 4 count mad or 5 count mad or even a 6 count mad. So this is what you will notice for mad fari'i. Every single letter after will be either a hamza or a sukoon. So if you see that there is a mad, and the letter after is hamza or the letter after is sukoon, you automatically know that it should be at least 4 counts. It should be at least 4 counts. Okay, so we are going to try to make them at least 4 counts. Even if you do not know the rules, you don't know if I should make it 5 counts or 6 counts or 4 counts, do at least 4 just to be sure. And then after that, of course, you can do like 6 once you know the rulings, but at least 4. Anytime you see that sign of mad and you see the next letter is hamza or sukoon, you will do it at least 4 counts. And sometimes you may do it 5 or 6, and then inshallah we will learn the rules for that and then know when or in which case we apply for that longer mad. But at least 4, and inshallah that should be safe for the time being. Now when it comes to mad fari'i, again I mentioned there are 2 categories. One is bisabab al-hamza, the next letter is a hamza, or the next letter is a sukoon. So for the letter hamza, we have different types of mads. We have mad al-muttasil, we have mad al-munfasil, we have mad as-sila kubra, and we have mad al-badal. So these are the 4 mudud that are under the category of bisabab al-hamza. Because of a hamza, these 4 mudud are going to be longer than 2 counts. Okay, and then on the other side we have bisabab al-sukoon. We have 3 mudud for this. We have mad lazim, mad arid lis-sukoon, and mad leen. And these are the 3 mudud that are impacted because of the sukoon that comes after the mad. Okay, inshallah now we will go on to the first example, and this should make it a little bit more clear. This first example we have already covered in the previous lesson as well. And this is going to be mad as-sila al-kubra. So this is a mad that we have already covered and we briefly touched upon when we were doing mad as-sila as-sughra. So mad sila, as we learned, means the connecting mad. And al-kubra means the greater. Now when we did mad as-sila as-sughra, the smaller connecting mad, we learned that it is called as-sughra because it is only a 2 count mad. It is the smaller of the 2 mudud. So we have a 4 count mad, which is greater, and we have a 2 count mad, which is smaller. So mad as-sila as-sughra from the word saghir is a 2 count mad. Mad as-sila kubra is the greater mad, and this is going to be 4 count mad. And the reason for this mad is because after that ha, mad as-sila, remember we need that pronoun ha, masculine 3rd person singular ha. We need that ha. The letter after this ha has to be a hamza. If the letter after is a hamza, it is going to be a 4 count mad. And this is exactly what we learned when we did mad as-sila as-sughra. You can remember or recall the rules that we covered. One of the rules was that for mad as-sila as-sughra, the smaller mad, there cannot be a hamza after the ha. Remember that was one of the rules. The first rule was that it had to be the ha, pronoun ha. It had to be dhamma or kasra. The letter after or before could not have a sukoon, and the letter after could not be a hamza. This was one of the rules of mad sila as-sughra. The reason for this is that if the letter after was a hamza, it is no longer mad sila as-sughra. Now it has been turned into mad sila al-kubra. Because of this hamza, we have to pull this mad for 4 counts at least. Okay, we have to pull this now for 4 counts bisabab al-hamza, because of that hamza. So the rulings for mad as-sila al-kubra and mad sila as-sughra are exactly the same. Again, we are looking for a pronoun ha, and this has to be masculine, 3rd person singular, as we already covered. it has to be between two vowel letters, meaning the letter before and the letter after has to have a haraka. It cannot have a sukun. The letter before or the letter after have to have fatha, dhamma, or kasra. It could not have a sukun. Again, this rule we have already covered when we did mad as-sila as-sughra. And then the last rule, which we have already covered, is that it can have either a dhamma or a kasra. It cannot have a fatha. Okay, so it has to have dhamma or kasra, has to be between two harakat letters, and it has to be the pronoun ha, masculine third person. Okay, so all of these rules we have already covered. We have already done this mad sila exactly the way before. Now the only difference is that here the next letter is a hamza. If the next letter is hamza, it is mad as-sila al-kubra. If the next letter is not a hamza, it is mad sila as-sughra. Okay, so again, the only reason we are making this a greater med, the only reason it is a 4-count med is because the next letter is a hamza. This hamza is the entire reason why we are lengthening this for 4 counts. This is a med that is bisabab al-hamza. Because of that hamza, it is now a 4-count med. So it is going to be lengthened the same as mad munfasil. It is going to be 4 counts, and some scholars say you can also do 5 counts. Okay, so at least 4 counts, and you can also do 5 harakat. So 4 or 5 harakat, 4 or 5 counts. This is mad sila al-kubra. Sughra again means smaller med, that is 2 counts. Mad as-sila al-kubra is the greater med, it is going to be 4 or 5 counts. Okay, and then 4 counts if you read a little bit faster. Some people read a little bit slower, so for them it may be closer to 5 counts. So depending on your speed, depending on what style you recite in, you can choose either 4 or 5. The only important thing is that once you have chosen a length, you have chosen 4 or you have chosen 5, stick with that throughout your recitation. Try not to switch between these. Once you have consistently picked a med, try to stick with that med throughout your recitation. So if you are doing 4, recite with 4, and if you are doing 5, then recite with 5 all throughout until you are done reciting. Now let's look at some examples of mad sila al-kubra. So we have maluhu akhlada. So here in this example, we have ha. So there is the ha dhamir, that masculine third person singular. Malahu means his wealth. Mal, wealth, hu, his. Malahu, his wealth. Masculine third person singular pronoun. We have that ha. Then it is going to be between 2 vowel letters. The letter before is a lam, which has a fatha, and the letter after is a hamza, which has a fatha. So both of these are harakat letters. And the ha has to have dhamma or kasra on it. So here the ha has the dhamma. And then also remember that for mad sila al-kubra, the next letter has to be a hamza. And the next letter here is akhladahu, which is a hamza. So here we have a 4-count med. We have a med fari'i, a 4-count med. So we are going to pull this for 4 to 5 counts. And you will notice that in the Quran, whenever we have mad sila al-kubra, you will see there is a small waw or a small ya. Exactly the way that we saw for mad sila as-sughra. There is that small waw or small ya, and on top of this waw or ya, there is going to be that sign of med. So it is going to be small. It is a small waw, small ya, and then a miniature med on top of this small letter. But you do see that sign of med. So when you see that sign of med, pull for 4 counts. This is the rule we are going to stick with throughout our recitation. If we see that sign of med, pull for at least 4 counts. And even for mad as-sila al-kubra, even though the waw and the ya are very small, they will still put a small med for you. So if you do not remember the rules, you do not know if this ha is for dhamir or if it's for something else, you don't remember any of the rules of mad sila, even if you don't know all of that, it is okay. Because you see there is that sign of med. You see either a waw or a ya, this means pull for 2 counts. And if you see there is a med on top of that, pull for 4 counts. Okay? So again, going back to our example, ma lahu akhlada. Now I'm going to pull this for 4 counts. Ma lahu akhlada. And you can also pull for 5 as well. Another example, ila ta'amihi ana. Okay? Ila ta'amihi. Here we have that ha. Letter before and after has harakat, and then the ha has a kasra, and then the letter after is a hamza, meaning this is a 4-count med. Ila ta'amihi anna. Okay, so here this is a 4-count med. So we are going to pull this for 4 counts. So if we are stopping here, then you do not have to read this med. So this is at the end of the ayah. إِلَى طَعَامِهِ النَّاسَ وَبَنَا الْمَاءَ صَبًّا. So this is the end of the ayah. So if you are stopping on this, you do not have to read that med. إِلَى طَعَامِهِ, you just stop on sukun. You don't have to read that med. If you are continuing, then the ha is followed by a hamza. Then you will have to read this med. And if you are stopping, then there is no hamza after because you have stopped. There is nothing after the letter ha. So in that case, you can just stop on a sukun. You don't have to read that med. And then if you are continuing, then in that case, you will have mad as-sila as-sughra or mad as-sila al-kubra if you are continuing. So again, this is mad sila al-kubra. Exact same rules as the previous med. We have lengthening. We have the pronoun ha used for masculine, third person singular. We have two voweled letters coming before and after. We have dhamma and kasra on it. And the letter after is a hamza. So these are the conditions for mad as-sila al-kubra. Again, if you do not remember or if you will forget later on, then just know that in the Quran you will see there is a small waw or a small ya, and on top there will be that sign of med to remind you that this is meant to be a 4-count med. Now let's go ahead and go to our lesson. Inshallah, we will keep an eye out for any of these signs of med, any med fari'i, and we will see if the letter after has a hamza or a sukun. So starting from ayah number 51, Ya ayyuhalladina amanu. And right away I see that the letter has that med. We see that sign of med on the alif, Ya ayyuha. This is a 4-count med at least. So we will pull this for 4 counts. Now we learned that for any of these signs of meds, anytime there is a 4-count med with that squiggly line, the letter after is always a hamza or a sukun. So in this case, this med is bisabab al-hamza. Because of that hamza, now we have a 4-count med. So you will notice that anytime there is that squiggly line, the next letter will always be hamza or med, or it will be a sukun. So here, ya ayyuha, this is a 4-count med. Ya ayyuhalladina amanu, la tattakhidul yahuda wan nasara. Here, sad is heavy, ra in this case is going to be heavy, and ra, we see again there is that 4-count med, and the letter after awliya is a hamza. So this is why this is a 4-count med. Awliya'a, again 4-count med, the letter after is a hamza. Ba'duhum, dad in this case is heavy. Awliya'u, 4-count med, again followed by the hamza. Ba'd, here dad is heavy. وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُم مِّنكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. So here, فَإِنَّهُ, then indeed he. So this is going to be mad sila as-sughra. And we see there is that small waw, so we will pull this for 2 counts. فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ, pull for 2 counts. Inna Allah, name of Allah here is going to be heavy. La yahdil qawm al-zalimin. Qaf is going to be heavy. Zalimin, Allah is going to be heavy. Fatara, ra here is going to be heavy. Alladina fi qulubihim, qaf is heavy. Maradun, ra in this case is heavy. Dad is heavy. Yusari'una, ra in this case is light. Fihim yaquluna, qaf is heavy. Nakhsha, this is a 4-count med. And we see the letter after is a hamza, which is causing this med. And then here, kha in nakhsha is heavy, and tusibana, sad is going to be heavy. Da'ira, this is a 4-count med, and again the letter after has a hamza. Ra in this case is going to be heavy, and then since we are stopping here, I will put a sukun on the ta' marbuta, and then I will make sure that I read this ha with a lot of hamz so that you can hear it from the lower chest, so we do not drop this ha. Da'ira. So make sure you read it from the chest. If you do not add enough hamz, you will not be able to hear it after you have stopped. If you say da'ira, now you do not hear that ha. So make sure you give it some air. Da'ira. So you can hear the presence of that ha. Fa'asallahu, name of Allah here is heavy. An ya'tiya bil fathi, ha is going to be from the middle of the throat. Aw amrin, ra in this case is light. Min indihi, this is mad sila as-sughra. We see that there is that small ya after, and this will indicate that this has to be a 2-count med. فيصبحوا. Sad is heavy. على ما أصروا. This is a 4-count med and the letter after is a hamza. So this is why that med is there. أصروا, ra in this case is heavy. في أنفسهم. This is a 4-count med and the letter after of course has a hamza. نادمين. And then here we will end on a 4-count med. So inshallah that is our lesson, ayah 51 and ayah number 52. And then in the next class we will quickly go over mad sila al-kubra one more time before we move on to the next type of mad. So we will stop here. Jazakallahu khairan kathiran. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamulaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuhu.
Assalamulaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuhu. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidna ilma. Allahumma faqihna fid din. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ilman nafi'an wa 'amalan mutaqabbalan wa rizqan tayyiban. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna ilma. Aameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, we're going to cover ayat 51 and 52 of Surah Al-Maida today. We'll start with the word meanings, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها, O الذين, those who, آمنوا, they believed, لا, do not, تتخذوا, you all take. خذ is the root word and that means to take. Ta in the beginning means you. The waw alif in the end makes this verb plural. And this is a command. So la tattakhidhu, do not, you all take or make. Al-Yahuda, al means the, Yahud, Jews, wa and an-Nasara, al, the Nasara, Christians. Awliya'a, guardians or close friends, protecting friends. This is plural for the word wali that we covered already before, and that means a protector, a best friend. And awliya means guardians or protecting close friends. Ba'duhum, ba'du, some, hum, of them. Awliya'u are guardians or protecting friends. Ba'd, of some or others. Wa and man, whoever. Yatawallahum. This comes from the root word wali again, but this is a verb in this case. Ya in the beginning means this word is in the third person. So yatawalla, he befriends or he makes protectors or guardians. Hum, them. So وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُمْ, and whoever makes them his close friends or makes them protectors or guardians. Min, from or among. Kum, all of you. فَإِنَّهُ, fa, then. Inna, indeed. Who, he. Minhum, min, from, whom, them. Inna, indeed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la, does not, yahdi, he guide. Huda is the root word and that means guidance. Ya in the beginning tells us that this word is in the third person and this is a verb. So yahdi, he guides. Al-qawm, the nation or the people. Al-zalimeen, those who do injustice. This word comes from the root word dhulm, which means wrongdoing or injustice. And al-zalim is somebody who is unjust. And ina ending just makes this word plural. So al-zalimeen, those who are unjust. Fatara, fa, so, tara, Ta, you, Ra, will see. Alladhina, those who, fi, in, qulubihim. Qulub is plural for the word qalb, which means heart. Qulub, hearts, him, theirs, maradun, a disease, a specific or big disease or sickness. Yusariuna, they hasten or they compete against each other. Ya in the beginning tells us this word is in the third person, so it either means he or they, and una ending makes this word plural, so it means they. Yusariuna, they rush or they compete against each other. Fi, in, him, them. Yaquluna, ya in the beginning tells us this word is in the third person. Una ending makes this word plural. So yaquluna means they say. Nakhsha, we fear. The root word here is khashya, which means fear. Noon in the beginning is the pronoun, and that means we. So nakhsha, we fear. An, that. Tusibana. The root word here is musiba, which means to reach or to strike, to befall. Okay, so tu in the beginning refers to the next word that's coming up, which is a calamity. So it means it. Tusiba, it reaches or befalls. Na, us. Na is the pronoun. Da'iratun. Da'ira means a misfortune or calamity. And da'ira is a change of fortune. Okay, so it can mean encircling as well. So calamity, fa'asa, fa, so, asa, perhaps. And then this word comes before the word Allah that's coming up next. It means that it will definitely happen. Okay, so instead of it meaning so maybe or perhaps, we can say so it is hoped. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, an, that, ya'tiya, he comes, bil fathi, be with al, the fathi, victory. And to come with victory, in English it makes more sense to say he brings victory. Okay, so ya'ti, be, means to come with, and it means that he brings. Al-Fath, the victory. O, or amrin, a matter. Min, from. Indi, near or with. He, him. Fa, then. Yusbihu, they will become. And ya in the beginning of this word, after the prefix fa, tells us this word is in the third person. Waw alif at the end of this verb means this is plural. So then they become ala, upon, ma, what, asarru, they kept secret. We've learned the word sirran before, and that's the root word, and that means secret or secretly. So asarru is a verb, and it means that they kept secret or they concealed. Fi, in, anfusihim. Anfus is plural for the word nafs, which means soul. So anfusi, souls, him, theirs. So put together, anfusihim means themselves. Nadimin, one's remorseful. Ina ending makes this word plural. Nadim is somebody who regrets something, and ina just makes it plural. So nadimin, one's regretful. Alhamdulillah. Now we're going to cover the tafsir of these ayat, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. As we learned already, the surah was revealed in the end, shortly before Prophet Muhammad ﷺ passed away. So the rules that are given in the surah are final. Okay, nothing was changed after these rules were sent. So all the do's and don'ts from this surah all apply. So no orders from this surah were changed or cancelled afterwards. Okay, because it was revealed towards the end. So the instructions in this surah are the last. So we should keep that in mind as we learn it and try to understand it. We recently learned that people who don't judge according to the orders of the Quran were called kafirin, zalimeen, and fasiqeen. Okay, that's what they are according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are kafirin, zalimeen, and fasiqeen. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was ordered to judge according to this book, to judge according to the Quran. And we learned that former prophets judged according to the books that were revealed to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. So we should implement the orders we're given in this book. We're not just meant to read it. Okay, we have to take all the instructions it gives us for life and follow them. In the last ayah we had covered, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Do they wish to be judged by the laws of ignorance? So we should think about what rules we follow that are of jahiliyyah. And we should try to stop doing those things now, since we found out about the rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. The rules He gave us in Islam are so much better than the traditions or cultures people follow. A lot of the traditions are ways of ignorance, and they go against Islam. Those are the things that we have to let go now, even if our forefathers did those things. Okay, because chances are that they didn't do everything perfectly, right? Everybody makes mistakes, so we don't have to stick to whatever they did exactly, but we do have to follow the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given. So we have to take that important step if we want to be properly guided. At least we should not be following the ways of Jahiliyyah now that we're studying and learning the Quran. And if we don't even bother to stop, even after we know these things, then who's going to stop following these ignorant ways? People may think that they're being modern when they do certain things, but they're actually being ignorant. Another thing that's common among people is that they're proud of their families, their sect, their castes, but Islam does not allow that. And we learned already that nobody is better according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except because of their piety. Okay, so anybody with more taqwa is better in the eyes of Allah than somebody who has less taqwa. That's the only way one person can be better than another. And the only reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us different languages and castes, tribes, or family names is for recognition. Okay, so one person cannot be better than another just because they belong to a certain family or tribe. It's un-Islamic to think that way. There are other things that Muslims do sometimes too that are ignorant. For example, they're impressed by the holidays of others besides people who are Muslims. And they don't really enjoy their own Muslim holidays. They follow the ways of the non-Muslims when it comes to inheritance, when it comes to dividing the estate. Some give their daughters a lot of things when they get them married, but they don't give them their share of the estate. Also, displaying beauty or adornment is so common nowadays, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids that. Some people kill their children, their unborn babies, for one reason or another, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has strictly forbidden that. Many Muslims think it's okay to visit fortune tellers, and they don't think there's anything wrong with it, even though it's haram to do that. Another thing Muslims often do nowadays is that they have candlelight vigils for people when they die. But this isn't what Islam taught us. And we all know what Islam orders us to do in a situation like that when someone passes away. And those are the things we should be doing in those situations. We have our own ways. So why do we need to follow others in these matters? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding all of us to not follow or prefer the ways of Jahiliyyah, because He gave us rules for every aspect of our lives that we need to follow. And alhamdulillah, we have beautiful rules to follow for everything we do in life. The problem is that we have not learned about those rules properly, and that's usually why we don't implement them. And that's why we follow the ways of others, even though they are nothing in comparison. They've been made up by people. They're not rules that Allah the Almighty gave. So how can they even compare? Once we understand the rules Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, and we try to implement them, we wouldn't care to follow the ways of others. Then we would be more than happy and content with our own ways. And then we wouldn't be impressed by what other people are doing. And there's no need at all to be fascinated by their ways when we have our own. Today we're going to learn some rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. Ayah 51 begins with the words, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O those who believed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing all the believers when an ayah starts off this way. And this is a beautiful connection that we all have with Him, even though we live on this earth and He is on the arsh. It's because we believe in Him that He addresses us by this title, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. It connects us to Him. And by saying this, He is telling all of us who believe in Him to listen to what's coming up. The other people who don't believe in Him would not listen because they don't believe in Him. That's why there are no instructions for them here. But we are expected to respond positively when we hear His orders, because we do believe in Him. We claim to be believers, so we must listen to what He tells us and obey. Remember, we learned that we're supposed to say Sami'na wa ata'na. We heard and we obeyed. It's because of so much love for us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us by this name, the believers. Like when we address our kids saying, my dear son or my dear daughter, instead of just calling them by their name. Calling them by the relationship we have with them expresses a lot more love for that person than just calling them by their name. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out to us here, by the relationship we have with Him because of our iman, the connection we have with Him. He calls us believers, and it expresses so much love. So let's see what He says after calling out to us. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O believers. And we already learned before that after addressing us this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala either orders us to do something or He tells us not to do something. And here He says, لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء. Take neither Jews nor Christians your protecting friends. Now, why does He say that? Someone who doesn't have much Islamic knowledge may think this is discrimination, but we'll learn why we shouldn't be best friends with the Jews and the Christians. We're told not to make them our wali, meaning a best or protecting friend, or someone who judges for us, someone who has our back when we need help. We're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to take them as walis. بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. They are only protecting friends of one another. They're not protecting friends for you. Now, we have to understand that it doesn't make a difference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all who we befriend, right? So to Him belongs the kingdom of the whole universe, the heavens. So it doesn't matter to Him what we do or who we become friends with. It doesn't make a difference to Him. We're not even the size of an atom compared to how great Allah the Almighty is. But He guides us just so we don't have to suffer. He stops us from doing anything that puts our iman in danger, because that is the greatest treasure that we have. And the things He forbids us from doing are things that would lead to a loss in this life or the hereafter. So He tells us here not to become best friends with the Jews and the Christians. If we are living in a mixed society among people who belong to different religions, we should keep in mind that this isn't the first time Muslims are living among others who are not Muslim. So we can't complain that we don't know what to do. What are we supposed to do because we live with them? We can't say that. The society in Medina was mixed too. There were Muslims, there were polytheists living there were Jews and hypocrites all living together in Medina. So we should learn about how Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dealt with others. He spoke to them and made business transactions with them too. He dealt with them. Okay, so it's not like He didn't even speak to them or deal with them. He did, but He just didn't take them as awliya or His best friends or people who would be able to judge. This means that Muslims should not choose them for any position that requires being trustworthy, from which they would be able to find out about the secrets of the Muslims, like the Muslim army, for example, or as a minister. Once during Umar radiallahu anhu's time, when he was Khalifa, when he met Abu Musa Ashari, he saw that he had chosen a Christian as his assistant. Umar radiallahu anhu told him not to do that, and he recited this ayah, even though he was just an assistant, not the ruler, right? But he told Abu Musa Ashari not to choose a non-Muslim for that position, so disbelievers would not be able to learn the secrets of the Muslims from him. So Muslims should not assign posts to non-believers which they can use to harm Muslims. They should choose Muslims for positions which require the person to be responsible and trustworthy. Secondly, Muslims should not take non-Muslims as best friends. The thing is, people are friends with each other because they share common interests, or they feel the same way about a lot of things. we don't usually befriend people who we don't get along with, right? So we become friends with people because we either have the same habits as them or we share a lot of interests with them. Even if we don't have everything in common, a lot of our likes and dislikes are similar. People don't befriend others who think the opposite way that they do, right? And when we befriend people who are non-Muslims, they influence us. How can we be friends with them when they're the enemies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Is it possible for them to be good friends with us when they speak rudely about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us not to be best friends with them, because it will get in the way of us practicing our religion, one way or another. The background of this ayah is that Banu Kanuka, a Jewish tribe, had a treaty with the Muslims. Once they were almost at war with the Muslims. The Khazraj tribe that accepted Islam later was non-Muslim before. So the Ansar from the Khazraj tribe were allies with the Banu Kanuka, the Jewish tribe. And back then, there was no law enforcement, so tribes had allies who they supported and protected. If one of the allies was at war against a group, so was the tribe who had a treaty with them. And if one of the allies was at peace with another tribe, so was their ally. So they were united in that way whenever they had become allies with a tribe. When Muslims were close to war with Banu Kanuka, it was a test for the Khazraj tribe because they had been allies with Banu Kanuka for so long. And it was a great test for the hypocrites. It was difficult for them because they only do what benefits them. So these ayat were revealed about a conversation between two people, Ubaidah bin Sabit and Abdullah bin Ubay, who we all know was the leader of the hypocrites, Abdullah bin Ubay. So when these ayat were revealed, Ubaidah bin Samit radiallahu anhu ended his friendship with the Banu Kanuka tribe. And he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam were enough as friends for him. But Abdullah bin Ubay said, I like to think carefully about what will happen in the future, so I can't end my friendship with them. And that's when these ayat were revealed. Also, some say that when the polytheists lost at the Battle of Badr, some Muslims said to the Jews that they should accept Islam before the same thing happened to them. But the Jews told the Muslims that just because they defeated some Quraysh didn't mean that they had become strong. So they warned the Muslims that they wouldn't be able to do anything to them, to the Jews. That's when Ubadah radiallahu anhu and Abdullah bin Ubay had discussed what we learned about. So they were told not to have close friendships with the Jews and the Christians because they were united. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has indirectly told us to befriend Muslims, like the Jews and Christians befriend people from their own religion. Okay, so indirectly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that you should become best friends with people who are like you, people who are Muslims. Next, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something very strictly. وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُم مِّنكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. And whoever of you disobeys this command will be counted as one of them. Whoever takes them as best friends is one of them. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a person is on the deen, on the religion of his friend, meaning that people become like the ones that they're friends with eventually. Either we become like our friends or our friends become like us. Like we start acting like each other. So both sides basically become the same. So whoever takes the Jews and the Christians as their close friends, their best friends, will adopt their ways eventually in the end. We are told to be best friends with believers. So we become like them. Even if we pick up any habits, it will be habits of the believers. And we shouldn't hand over our secret matters to the non-believers. But we should deal with them in a good manner when doing business with them, or when dealing with them in social matters. And when they are our neighbors, we have to be good to them. Okay, so Islam does not forbid us from doing these things. We should help non-Muslims when needed. When there's somebody who is needy, or when someone is injured or in pain, we can't be indifferent to them. We can't think that it's none of our business, it's fine because they're non-believers. It's not. Okay, we have to help them. We have to be kind to them and care. But we just can't take them as our best friends. Nowadays, people aren't just best friends with others who are close to them and they spend a lot of time with. Okay, instead they are able to be best friends or close friends with people through social media, by using social media, using the internet, because this world is a global village now. So due to that, it's as if you are the same culture as them and you're with them even when you are far away from them. So people have become awliya to each other in that way too, even when they are far from each other, distance-wise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has warned us not to do that. Inna Allah la yahdi al-qawma al-zalimin. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not guide the wrongdoers. The word zalim describes someone who doesn't give the deserving person their due right. The Muslims have a right over us, that we choose them as our best friends. But if we leave them and take non-believers as our best friends, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He will not guide us. So, for people who do that, they continue following the path that they have taken. He lets them continue on that path. A lot of people think that they have done everything after they accept Islam and take the Shahada. They think they've done enough. But that is just the beginning. We have to follow the rules of Islam in all aspects of our lives. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says not to take non-believers as best friends. So this has to be done. We have to let Islam judge our matters in every phase of life. Because being Muslim or mu'min is not a title that we can just adopt and claim that we are Muslim or mu'min. Our character should depict that we are Muslims or mu'mins. We have to act that way. We can't claim to be Muslim if we can't stand up for our deen. If they look down at our religion, other people, and we can't say anything to defend it, how can we be mu'mineen? Imagine a man who doesn't care for his children or provide for them. Everyone thinks that person is irresponsible and he isn't fulfilling his responsibility. But that's what we are doing with Islam nowadays. We claim to be Muslim, but we don't do anything when we see people say bad things about it. We don't care about what they think of it. We can't just take on the ways of others, leaving our own deen. That's what happens when we become best friends with disbelievers. When it comes to interacting with people and dealing with them in a good manner, there is no discrimination in Islam at all. We have to be polite and care about the non-believers as well. But we shouldn't cross the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set. So we shouldn't be best friends with them, where we share all our secrets with them and we see them all the time and spend a lot of time with them. Because that affects our deen. It affects our iman. And if you want to go into depth about لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us not to adopt their culture. Okay? So He's telling us not to be like them. That's what He is really telling us to avoid here. The condition of most of the Muslims these days is sad. They just copy other people. They take different things from different cultures and they just do what they see other people doing. They have become so fake that they just copy other people instead of following our own beautiful religion. If Muslims really stick to the deen, 1/3 of this world would be free of disbelief and hypocrisy. Because 1/3 of the people in this world, 1 in every 3 people, is Muslim. Subhanallah. So we should think about how the Sahaba of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were. They precisely followed what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught them. They didn't do anything to go against the teachings of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They watched him closely and they preserved those ways and copied him closely, not others. That's how Islam got to us in its original form. And that's why it's protected from being changed in any way, because they did exactly what they saw Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam do. But Muslims today don't follow their own religion. They adopt the ways of other people and they take on things from different cultures. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided us about who we should befriend. A lot of times people become friends with others for worldly benefits too. Okay? Not just because they like them, sometimes they do it for worldly benefits. So He says, فَتَرَى الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. So you see that those who have the disease in their hearts. What disease is this? Hypocrisy. يُسَارِعُونَ فِيهِمْ. They move around in them. They rush to be around the Jews and Christians. They try so hard to fit in with them. They say, نَخْشَىٰ أَن تُصِيبَنَا دَائِرَةٌ. We fear that a calamity will strike us. Remember what we learned about what Abdullah bin Ubay had said? That he couldn't break off his connections with them in case times changed and Muslims were in danger. So he wanted the Jews to fall back on. He didn't want to break off his ties from them. So the Jews of that time were like the West is today for the Muslims. And so they thought, people back then thought whatever the Jews did was right, because they were the people of the book. They thought that they had so much knowledge and people looked up to their culture. And they thought that they were better than themselves. Muslims had just become strong. So people weren't sure about how things would be for them later on. So the hypocrites, especially the hypocrites, not everybody, just the hypocrites, they weren't sure how things would be for the Muslims later on. So they wanted to play it safe. They wanted to continue being friends with the Jews in case they defeat the Muslims later on and become dominant. So they didn't want to be against such a powerful group to favor Muslims who had just migrated after being oppressed for a long time. They were worried that they would have to deal with the Jews they had been living alongside. In case any problems came up, they were the ones who would have to deal with them if the Muslims were to be defeated. That's why they wanted to be close to them, the Jews, so they would help them if any misfortune reached them later on, because they wanted to seek help from them. The hypocrites try to stay with both sides, and there are many people who are like that now too. They spy on Muslims for others, just so other nations think that they're on their side, so that they would save them, protect them if they ever went through any problems. But we learn from history. History proves that hypocrites don't fit in with either side, neither the Muslims and nor the enemy. Of course, the Muslims don't trust them after their betrayal, but even the other side doesn't trust them because they betray their own people. So they think, oh, well, how can we trust them when they're betraying their own Muslim people? So they know that they're not trustworthy after deceiving their own people. So Muslims have to be faithful to the believers and to their iman. We have to stand by the shahada that we've taken with no other options. We have to stick to Islam no matter what, even when there's pressure from others, and even if we feel that we should try to fit in with other people so they would accept us if we act like them. But that's not how things work. They still think of us as Muslims, and they treat us like Muslims when calamities strike. Okay, when anything bad happens to the Muslims, we are a part of the Muslims. We are one of the Muslims. So they will fight against you when they fight against Muslims. There's no need to try to be like them just to be accepted, because we have to follow Islam. The hypocrites have a disease of the heart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares people who try to fit in with both sides hypocrites. That's what He calls them. Because believers are open about their faith. They live according to the shahada they take. And they want to die being Muslim. They're willing to give up their lives to be martyred if needed, instead of giving up their iman. But the hypocrites go back and forth. They go between belief and disbelief. So they're not sincere in their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept their connection either then, because they're not even faithful to deen. They leave it when things get tough. So we should remember one rule in life that we should follow at all times. We have to stick to our religion. Even if we have to die trying, never give up our religion or practicing it. Just stick to it, no matter what happens. Even if Muslims are going through tough times, even if the Ummah is struggling, the hypocrites were afraid to be on the side of the Muslims exclusively, in case the Muslims faced problems. But true believers can't do that. They don't rush to move around in the camps of the non-believers. They only stick to the Muslims. The only reason hypocrites did that was because they didn't trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect them. They should have had faith that He could easily protect them, the way He protected Ibrahim alayhi salam in the fire that he was thrown in, the way He split the ocean for Musa alayhi salam and his people to make a path for them when Fir'aun was behind them with his army. He protected them, He enabled them to cross, and He made Fir'aun's powerful army drown, him and his whole army. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Ismail alayhi salam. He protected him when he was about to be slaughtered. So wouldn't He protect them if they stuck to their deen, if they were steadfast? Of course He would have. But they did not trust Him. They only trusted others to protect them. And they didn't want to upset them. They sought protection from them. They thought that they would help them if they were friends with them. So they didn't want to upset them in any way. As we learned already, people can be hypocrites, like individuals, and also countries can be hypocrites too. Many nations rush to be on the side of the Jews and Christians for their own benefit, or because they're afraid of not having their support if they were to face any problems. But we should place our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Muslims, we have to do that, because the mu'mineen are steadfast no matter what problems they go through or what difficulties arise. Because of their iman, they get through those issues without giving up their iman. But as for the hypocrites, they go back and forth without being loyal to any side. فَعَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَأْتِيَ بِالْفَتْحِ أَوْ أَمْرٍ مِّنْ عِنْدِهِ. So soon, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you victory or a decision according to His will. Now, the word asa normally means perhaps, or that it's possible, or it's hoped, like this will happen. But when it is used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it means that it will definitely happen. It doesn't mean that there's a chance of it happening. It means that it will certainly happen when it's used with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name. So it is for sure. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it's for sure that Allah will give you a victory or a decision. فَيُصْبِحُوا عَلَى مَا أَسَرُّوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ نَادِمِينَ. Then they will regret what they're hiding in their hearts. When we see people who copy the disbelievers just because they're so impressed by them, they're fascinated by their ways, when they try to act like them just so they can also be considered great, we should remember that there was a time when the non-believers used to copy the Muslims because they were so impressed by them. But Muslims have lost their religion, so they don't have this world or the hereafter. They're losing both, the success of this world and the hereafter, because they're not sticking to their deen. They're not steadfast. They don't have anything left. So then they look at the disbelievers. They look towards them and then they try to copy them, thinking that maybe they'll be great if they act like them, that they can succeed that way. They don't trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anymore. And that's why they don't succeed in this life or the hereafter. But the non-believers used to look at the Muslims before because they had so much respect for them. The Muslims were considered so great, so honorable. They were proud of the Arabic language and thought of it as an art. The well-off non-believers hired Muslims to care for their children, so their kids would learn Islamic manners and etiquette. They were proud to dress like the Muslims. But now that they are more powerful, Muslims have started copying them. They look at them and they're impressed because Muslims are weak now. So they try to copy their ways when it comes to how they dress or how they speak. When these ayat were revealed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Muslims that they would definitely be victorious. And that did happen. The Muslims conquered Mecca and Khaybar, and the Muslim empire spread to far lands, distant lands. أو أمر من عنده, or he will give a decision according to his will. When the hypocrites thought that they'd be in trouble if the Muslims were defeated, that they would have to suffer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them that He will grant Muslims victory. Or He could order something else to happen. What if He were to make the Jews go through problems? Or to disgrace them? Or exile them from the land? And they were exiled from Medina later on. They were expelled. Then what would happen to the hypocrites then? فَيُصْبِحُوا عَلَى مَا أَسَرُّوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ نَادِمِينَ. Then they will regret what they're hiding in their hearts. They'll regret trying to belong to both sides. They will be regretful in this life and the hereafter. And how is it that they're going to be regretful in this life? Because the Muslims didn't trust them anymore after that, and neither did the Jews. So those who were steadfast in Islam were much better off than the hypocrites. And the hypocrites will be remorseful in the hereafter too, in their grave. They'll be embarrassed on the Day of Judgment. They'll be humiliated. They will regret not being firm on deen when they see how the Muslims succeed for remaining steadfast, when they see the Muslims achieving great ranks. So the hypocrites didn't get worldly benefits or gains or achieve anything in the hereafter. They'll see that Jews that they ran to befriend were maghdubi alayhim anyway. And all of their efforts to impress them and deceive the Muslims went to waste. There was no point. They'll realize that their hypocrisy did not help them at all. And why was it that they had become hypocrites? Because they wanted to please the Jews. But they were defeated anyway, right? So it didn't help them in this life, and neither is it going to help them in the hereafter. They will be regretful. And there's a very important lesson for Muslims in this ayah. The Muslims who are trying so hard to adopt the culture of the non-Muslims. Muslims who are trying so hard to copy them, to copy the non-believers. They should know that maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring about a time when Muslims will be dominant again in this world. When they'll be looked up to, when they'll be respected, they'll be honorable. What would they do then? Then they would rush back to Islam, right? That's what they're going to try to do. Wouldn't that be embarrassing? That they tried so hard to fit in with the non-believers, but Muslims would overpower them. then they are going to be regretful for not remaining steadfast. And there will really be a time when Islam will be dominant in the land, when Isa alayhi salam will come back to this earth. And this will happen before the Day of Judgment. What will hypocrites do then? We are taught to trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have tawakkul in Him. Have trust in Him. Place your trust in Him. Have tawakkul. And we're told not to be like the munafiqeen. Okay, we're not supposed to be like the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, who don't belong to either side. They don't want to give up this side or that. But they'll be regretful if they do that. They won't belong to either side. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to practice Islam fully and enter religion completely and not try to copy the ways of others who are not Muslims. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم آمين يا رب العالمين جزاكم الله خيرا كثيرا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.